Hey, ladies and gentlemen, today we are moving into our first set of notes in this new chapter on the senses. We already took some vocabulary on it, so you have an understanding what's going on. But if you missed out, first go back and check out the vocab. And secondly, uh, we are talking about part of the nervous system. We talk about how the nerves send messages to your brain, but we didn't talk about how the nerves kind of comprehend those messages. So that's what this is all about. So let's jump right into our notes on the senses. We're going to be jumping into the somatic and special senses. We are not going to be talking about the special senses today. Those are probably more interesting ones that we're going to build up to, like the sense of smell, sense of hearing, sense of sight. Today, we're going to be talking more about uh, sense of touch, pain, some other things. We'll touch up on some of this, but not go into detail until later. So let's begin our notes mostly on the somatic senses. First are some words we talked about in the vocabulary: receptors. These are specially designed sensory neurons. At the very tip of your neurons, on the tip of the dendrites, please remember these words from the last chapter, we have the sensory receptors, the part of the dendrite that actually picks up the information. They detect environmental changes. The ones we talked about from last chapter, the change that they picked up was chemical, neurotransmitters, but they don't all pick up neurotransmitters. Some of them pick up stuff from the outside world, what we call environmental changes. And they're going to send a sensory impulse to your central nervous system, just like the sensory nerves from last chapter. If I'm going too fast, this is a video. Please feel free to pause. The first kind of sensory receptor that we're going to talk about is a chemoreceptor. This is actually the type that we talked about last chapter, where they picked up neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters are a type of chemical. That's what chemo refers to. But not all chemoreceptors pick up neurotransmitters, but they all do pick up, or they are all stimulated by a chemical concentration of a substance, like the air you breathe or the food that you taste. You have chemical receptors picking that up. So how they work, like over here in your nasal passage, you have specially designed neurons hanging down, and on the tip of those neurons are chemoreceptors. So as the chemicals you breathe in touch them, they are going to send a message to your brain. Then we also have pain receptors stimulated by tissue damage. You get kicked in the shin. You've damaged something. You may not even see the damage, but it's there. Maybe microscopic. You may have destroyed a few cells or bruised a bone, something. But your brain is going to get the message because pain receptors in that area are now sending the information to your brain. Then we have thermoreceptors, stimulated by changes in temperature. Like this hair dryer heats up the air around this woman's head, so she is feeling the temperature change. And we have mechanoreceptors, stimulated by changes in pressure. When you press on someone else's hand, like in this picture, their skin moves, creating a bit of pressure, and that change is what gets picked up by that. Going back up to this one with the hair dryer, not only is she going to be feeling the temperature change with the thermoreceptors, but because it's blowing air on her, she's going to feel air pressure change as well. I mean, she feels the wind. And then we got photoreceptors. By the way, this is a picture of an eyeball, if you couldn't tell. Your eyeball, we're going to go into a lot more detail about it, but here is the iris, the color part of your eye, and the pupil is actually just a hole, and behind that is a lens. As light goes into the pupil, that lens is going to refract or bend the light to put things into better focus. In the back of your eye, you have specialized receptors called photoreceptors, because photo means light, receiving light. And they are going to be stimulated by the wavelengths of this light energy. And we're going to talk about the different kinds of photoreceptors later. So now we know the different kinds of receptors, let's talk about actually sensing things. A sensation is a feeling, but no, not all touch, right? Sometimes it's temperature feeling, sometimes pain feeling, sometimes it's smell, which is technically a sensation, technically a type of feeling. It occurs when the brain interprets a sensory impulse. So this woman takes a step and her nerves send the information to her brain and she senses it. That's right, guys. You sense things with your brain. Right? You receive the information with the mechanoreceptors in your foot, but the sensory nerves send the message to your brain, and your brain tells you what you feel. So all feelings or all sensations are in your head, all in your brain. Not to be confused with projection, which is what you actually are experiencing. The cerebral cortex, or part of your brain that you're thinking with, makes it seem like the sensation is coming from the simulated receptors. So you sense it with your brain, but then your brain tells you that you feel it with your foot. This allows a person to know where the simulation is coming from. So even though you're technically feeling it with your mind tells you that you feel it with your foot. And of course, you believe whatever your brain tells you because you don't have a choice in the matter. You always believe your brain. Now, here's a weird thing. We did not talk about this in the vocabulary. Sensory adaptation. This is when you get used to a feeling. Your receptors adapt to a stimulus. Over time, the signal decreases until it stops because your nerves aren't going to continuously tell you everything. You'll just be overwhelmed with information, right? If you're not making any changes, eventually your brain just goes, okay, screw it. I'm going to stop listening to this impulse. And you stop noticing it. Example, after a while, a garbage collector doesn't notice the smell anymore. Go ahead, ask them. Go out and next time someone's collecting the trash, stop and have a conversation. Ask them if they even smell it anymore. Chances are they don't. It's just air. Because if they're not making any changes, they're going to be surrounded by the smell all the time. Eventually, their brain just stops registering it altogether. Here, we'll try this experiment. Not with smell, but with pain. That's right, pain. I'm going to ask you guys to hurt yourselves right now. Pinch yourself. Just enough. Don't cause any real lasting damage, but just pinch yourself a little bit and then keep adding pressure until you start to feel pain. Then stop adding pressure. Hold it. Do not add any more pressure. Keep it as it is. And then hold that for about 15 seconds. I'll time you. Go. All right. After about 15 seconds, do you feel it anymore? Does it still hurt as much? If you did this right, chances are no, you don't. Chances are that pain disappeared. If you still felt it, you probably started adding pressure to continue feeling it, in which case you don't do that. After a while, your brain realized that you were not going to let go, but you weren't causing too serious a damage, so it just stopped registering and the pain felt like it went away. So, what are the senses? We have two different kinds. We have the somatic senses and we have the special senses. The somatic senses that we're going to be talking about today can be sense of touch and pressure, sense of temperature, sense of pain, things that we don't need any special tools for, just the nerve endings themselves. What we're going to get into later are special senses, things that we actually do need additional body parts to help out, like the sense of smell, we have our nasal passage, taste, we have our tongue and the taste buds, hearing, we have our ears, equilibrium, we have a specialized organ inside of our ears, and sight, we have our eyes. We will get to all of this later. So today, let's just stay on the normal somatic senses. Starting with touch and pressure. These are going to be using the mechanoreceptors we talked about, the pressure receptors. These receptors detect forces that displace or deform tissue, meaning moves your skin. So if you were to feel a touch, a pressure change, that will send a message to your brain. Mechanoreceptors are underneath your skin telling you that you felt something. And there are three types of those mechanoreceptors doing that. We got the sensory nerve fiber, which is just a straight up plain mechanoreceptor. Common nerves between the epithelial cells. You get touched and they feel it. The second two kinds are called corpuscles. Not to be confused later on, corpuscle actually means any group of cells that are not nailed down in place, like your blood cells, are technically corpuscles. I do not know why these also are called corpuscles because these are nailed down in place. They're not moving. But these are the Meissner corpuscles and the Pacinian corpuscles. They are exactly the same in every way except location. So Meissner corpuscles are going to be handling sensitive touch, like tickling, a light caress, because you're going to find these near the fingertips, palms, lips, even your sexual organs where you're extra sensitive to light touches. The Pacinian corpuscles are going to be deeper down, deep tissue. You're going to feel these with massages or like strong handshakes. Now, I did skip something in the Meissner corpuscles, and that was a physical description. I'm going back to that, but I want you to know the Meissner corpuscle and the Pacinian corpuscle have the exact same description. The only difference is location. So let's talk about what they both look like. They're both small masses of connective tissue. Masses, multiple tissues here. Each one has two or more sensory nerve fibers. Backtracking, your sensory nerve fiber, your basic common one, a corpuscle is two or more of those, and then they get wrapped up together. So all of this is not a fingerprint. Everyone thinks this is a fingerprint. No, these are nerve fibers going in and then wrapped up in a circle. So wherever you touch, you're going to feel it. If you touch this whole thing, it's almost as if you're touching it in multiple places, right? It's feeling it here, 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 everywhere. So this makes you extra sensitive between having multiple nerve fibers and being all balled up in one spot. You are very sensitive in that one spot. It looks just like this at the surface of your skin, which makes it a Meissner corpuscle, and it looks just like this deeper in your skin, making it a Pacinian corpuscle. That's your difference. Meissners are on the surface, Pacinian is deeper down. Switching gears to the temperature, these are thermoreceptors. Thermo, meaning warmth. They are receiving warmth or lack of warmth. We would call that cold. They are warm receptors. They sense warmth. Most responsive above 25 degrees Celsius, or as we would say here in America, 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they kind of stop responding around 45 Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. That's right, around 113 degrees of direct temperature, your thermoreceptors just give up, and then your pain receptors kick in, and you start getting that burning feeling. Then you also have cold receptors too. They're going to sense obviously coldness, and they're most responsive around 20 degrees Celsius, or as we would call it, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And then when you get about 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, again, they just kind of stop responding, and then your pain receptors kick in. You get a freezing feeling. Speaking of pain, pain nerve fibers exist everywhere except your brain. That's right, no pain, because what do we talk about? Your brain is made of neurons called interneurons. You feel pain with sensory neurons. So you don't have sensory neurons in your brain, they're sending messages to your brain. So your brain doesn't actually feel pain. The nerve fibers pick up the pain and tell your brain, and then your brain interprets it, and your brain tells you you feel pain, but you're not actually feeling anything. If a doctor were to poke your brain with a needle, you would not feel it with your brain. You wouldn't know they were doing it. There are two kinds of pain fibers. We call them acute pain fibers and chronic pain fibers. Acute pain fibers are thin fibers. Ever hear of acute pain? It's like sharp, painful pain. It's because the nerves have myelin sheaths. I told you back in the last chapter that not every neuron has myelin sheaths, right? What do? They keep the nerve impulse inside the axon. So all of the electricity makes it to the axon terminal. So all of that information gets to spread. So you get a lot of pain from this kind of nerve. And like I said, you're going to associate this with sharp pains, very painful in one spot. For instance, this is a nail. This is a foot. You see where I'm going with this. You would be very aware of where this pain was coming from. That's acute pain. Not to be confused with chronic pain, which you don't always know where that's coming from. That is because chronic pain fibers do not have myelin sheaths. So there's nothing really to hold that electricity in, and the nerve impulse spreads to the next neuron over, which then spreads to the next one over, to the next one over, to the next one over, and you really don't know where the source of the pain was. Now, it's not as strong of a pain because it got spread out, but you don't know where it's coming from. So it's a larger area that's hurting. This is what we call dull aching pains, difficult to pinpoint. So that's like when you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, my neck really hurts. I mean, my shoulder. Yeah, definitely my neck. You know, the area of my head behind my ear, that area, no neck, definitely my shoulder. Back. My back hurts. I don't know. It's this whole general area hurts. Because you can't really pinpoint it, you can't fix it, and the pain just lasts forever, and chronic pain drives people crazy. So that's what we mean by associated with dull, aching pains. And then we got what we call referred pain, which means you actually kind of know where it's coming from, but you're not actually right. Example, your left arm hurts during a heart attack. Take a look at this picture. This blue line represents a pain nerve fiber coming from the heart to the brain, to the spinal cord. Well, you also have one coming from your left arm to the exact same spinal nerve. They become one and the same. So by the time it gets to your brain doesn't know which one it came from and has to decide. And sometimes your brain just chooses wrong. So as the information goes to your brain, it now has to project where do you feel the pain. Remember, this is sensation and this is projection, telling you where you feel the pain. So the damage is in your heart, but your brain tells you it's in your arm, and now you're having a heart attack going, ow, my arm hurts. And then you don't fix it because you think it's your arm. You're not as concerned about your arm as you are your heart. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we're going to call it quits today. Go to Google Classroom. You should have an assignment waiting for you, and I will see you next time.